Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for over 14 years, and throughout that time, he had witnessed countless memorable moments that ranged from hilariously absurd answers to touching displays of family affection. However, on a Wednesday afternoon in November 2024, something occurred on that stage that would shake him to his core and remind everyone present that beneath the bright lights and playful competition, real lives and real emotions were always at stake. The Patterson family from Sacramento, California stood ready to compete against the Chen family from Boston, Massachusetts, and what began as an ordinary taping would transform into one of the most emotionally raw and ultimately redemptive moments in the show's long history. If you appreciate stories about love, commitment, and the courage it takes to fight for your marriage when everything seems lost, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life stories that remind us what truly matters. The Patterson family consisted of Robert Patterson, a 45-year-old accountant, his wife of 22 years, Linda, who was 43, their adult son Michael at 21, Robert's sister Karen at 48, and Karen's husband Tom at 50. The family had applied to be on Family Feud as a way to celebrate their upcoming milestone anniversary and to create a fun memory together. Linda had been particularly excited about the opportunity, viewing it as a chance to showcase their strong family unit and perhaps win some money that could go toward the European vacation she had been dreaming about for years. Linda Patterson was a dedicated elementary school librarian who had spent the past 2 decades pouring her heart into her marriage, her son, and her career. She had met Robert in college when they were both studying business, and she had fallen in love with his quiet intelligence and steady reliability. They had married young, just 21 and 23 respectively, and had built what Linda believed was a solid life together. She had supported Robert through the challenging early years of his career, had been the primary caregiver for their son during his childhood, and had worked hard to maintain her own professional identity while also being a devoted wife and mother. What Linda did not fully understand was that over the past several years, Robert had been slowly disconnecting from their marriage. It was not a dramatic pulling away, but rather a gradual emotional withdrawal that happened so incrementally that neither of them had really acknowledged it. Robert had thrown himself into his work, staying late at the office more frequently, taking on additional clients, and spending weekends catching up on projects. He told himself he was doing it for the family, to provide financial security, but the truth was more complicated. He felt trapped in a life that had become routine and predictable, and he had begun to resent the very stability that had once been his goal. The dynamic between Robert and Linda had shifted over the years into something more like roommates than romantic partners. They coordinated schedules, divided household responsibilities, and coexisted peacefully, but the spark that had drawn them together had dimmed to almost nothing. They rarely had meaningful conversations anymore. Their physical intimacy had dwindled to nearly nothing, and when they did spend time together, it felt obligatory rather than joyful. Linda sensed that something was wrong but kept telling herself it was just a phase that all long-term marriages went through, that they would reconnect once life was less busy, once their son was fully independent, once Robert's work pressure eased. The game had progressed normally through the first several rounds, with both families displaying good energy and competitive spirit. The Patterson family was performing well, and Linda was genuinely enjoying herself, laughing at the funny answers and cheering on her family members. She kept catching Robert's eye and smiling at him, trying to share these moments of joy, but she noticed that he rarely smiled back, that his responses seemed mechanical and distant. Then came the question that would shatter the carefully maintained facade of their marriage. Steve Harvey approached the podium where Linda and her opponent from the Chen family stood ready for the face-off. He read from his card with his characteristic theatrical flair. "We asked 100 married people to complete this sentence. The most romantic thing my spouse ever said to me was blank." The audience murmured appreciatively, anticipating sweet answers about declarations of love and devotion. Linda buzzed in first, her reflexes quick and her competitive instinct engaged. Steve turned to her with an encouraging smile. "Linda, the most romantic thing your spouse ever said to you was what?" Linda did not hesitate. Her face lit up with a genuine smile as she recalled one of her favorite memories. "I will love you forever." The audience made appreciative sounds, and Steve nodded approvingly. "I will love you forever. That's beautiful. Let's see if it's on the board." The answer was indeed there, appearing as the number 2 response with 28 points. The Patterson family erupted in celebration, and Linda returned to the family podium feeling happy and nostalgic. She looked at Robert, expecting to share a moment of connection over that memory, but what she saw on his face stopped her cold. He was not smiling. He was not celebrating their team's success. Instead, he looked stricken, almost ill, and there was something in his expression that sent a chill down Linda's spine. The game continued with the Patterson family controlling the board. Additional answers were revealed. "You complete me" was on the board. "You're my soulmate" was also there. Each romantic phrase that appeared seemed to make Robert more uncomfortable, more withdrawn. His sister Karen noticed and leaned over to whisper, "Robert, are you okay? You look terrible." He nodded but did not speak, and Karen exchanged a worried glance with her husband, Tom. When it came time for Robert's turn to contribute an answer, Steve Harvey approached him at the podium. Steve was skilled at reading people after years of hosting, and he immediately picked up on Robert's distress. "Robert, you all right there? You're looking a little green around the gills." The audience chuckled, assuming it was just nerves about being on television. Robert opened his mouth to give an answer, but what came out was not what anyone expected. "I can't do this," Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper. Steve leaned in, not sure he had heard correctly. "What's that?" Robert spoke louder this time, his voice cracking with emotion. "I can't do this. I can't stand here and pretend that everything is fine when it's not. I can't keep lying." The studio went quiet. Steve's expression shifted from jovial host to concerned human being in an instant. "Hold on now, what are you talking about?" Robert turned to face Linda, who was standing at the family podium looking confused and increasingly alarmed. "Linda, I need to tell you something. I should have told you a long time ago, but I was too much of a coward. When you said that the most romantic thing I ever told you was that I would love you forever, it killed me. Because the truth is, I don't think I do anymore. I don't think I love you anymore." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. The studio audience gasped collectively, many people covering their mouths in shock. The Chen family stood frozen at their podium, not knowing where to look or what to do. Steve Harvey, for one of the few times in his career, was rendered completely speechless. But none of that mattered because all eyes were on Linda Patterson, whose face had gone from confusion to comprehension to absolute devastation in the space of seconds. Linda made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Her hand flew to her chest as if she had been physically struck. Her knees buckled slightly, and her son Michael rushed to her side to steady her. Mom, are you okay?" But Linda could not respond. She was staring at her husband with an expression of such profound hurt and disbelief that it was painful for everyone watching. Robert continued, the words pouring out now as if a dam had broken. "I've been feeling this way for years. I've been going through the motions, pretending to be happy, but I'm not. I'm miserable. I wake up every morning and feel like I'm suffocating. I look at our life and all I see is routine and obligation. I don't feel anything anymore. I'm sorry, Linda. I'm so sorry, but I can't keep pretending." Linda found her voice then, though it came out thin and shaky. "You don't love me? After 22 years, after everything we've built together, you don't love me?" Tears were streaming down her face now, and she made no attempt to wipe them away. "When did this happen? When did you stop loving me?" Robert shook his head helplessly. "I don't know. It wasn't one moment. It was gradual. We grew apart. We became different people. I tried to convince myself that it was enough, that stability and partnership were the same as love, but they're not, and I can't keep lying to you or to myself." Steve Harvey had recovered from his initial shock and stepped forward with both hands raised. Okay, we need to stop right here. We need to stop the game." He turned to his production team. "Cut the cameras. Give this family privacy." But Linda shook her head violently. "No, don't stop. He wanted to say this here in front of all these people, so everyone needs to hear what comes next." She walked toward Robert with unsteady steps, and when she reached him, she looked up into his face with tears still flowing. "You don't love me anymore. After I supported you through graduate school, after I raised our son while you built your career, after I put my own dreams on hold so you could pursue yours. After 22 years of waking up next to you, cooking your meals, doing your laundry, being your wife, you don't love me anymore." Her voice was rising now, the pain transforming into anger. "Did you wake up this morning planning to tell me this? Did you get dressed this morning knowing you were going to destroy our marriage on national television? Or did you just decide in this moment that now was a good time to blow up our entire life?" Robert tried to speak, but Linda was not finished. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? You've humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. You've devastated our son. You've torn apart our family on a game show stage. What kind of person does that?" Robert's face was wet with tears now, too. "I'm sorry. I know this is the worst possible way to do this. But when you said that thing about me telling you I'd love you forever, I just couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't look at you and lie one more time. I thought I could get through this taping and then we could talk privately, but I just couldn't do it. Linda laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. You couldn't lie one more time? You've been lying to me for years by your own admission. You've been lying every time you kissed me goodbye, every time you said you loved me, every time you made plans for our future. But now, right now, your conscience decides to make an appearance. Steve Harvey had been listening to this exchange with a deepening frown. When Linda finished, he stepped between them and addressed Robert directly. I need to say something here, and I need you to listen carefully. What you just did was not brave. It was not honest. It was cruel. Robert started to protest, but Steve cut him off with a sharp gesture. No, you need to hear this. You say you couldn't keep pretending that you had to tell the truth. But the truth is, you chose this moment, this public moment, to confess your feelings because it gave you an escape route. Steve continued, his voice firm but not unkind. If you really respected this woman, if you really wanted to handle this with integrity, you would have had this conversation at home, in private, where she could react without an audience. You would have given her the dignity of processing this devastating news without hundreds of people watching. Instead, you dropped this bomb in the most public way possible, and now she has to deal with her pain while cameras record every moment. The studio audience murmured in agreement. Steve turned to Linda then, his expression softening. Come here, sit down. He guided her to a chair that a production assistant had brought onto the stage. Linda sat heavily, her whole body shaking. Steve knelt down beside her so they were at eye level. I know you're hurting right now. I know this feels like the end of the world, but I want you to take some deep breaths with me, okay? Just breathe. Linda tried to follow his guidance, taking shaky breaths while tears continued to flow. Steve stayed there beside her, his presence calm and grounding. After a moment, he spoke again. Linda, can I ask you something? And I want you to really think about the answer before you respond. She nodded. Do you love him? Right now, in this moment, after what he just said, do you still love your husband? Linda looked at Steve, then at Robert, then back at Steve. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion, but clear. Yes, I love him. I've loved him since I was 20 years old. I've loved him through good times and hard times. I've loved him when he was easy to love and when he was difficult. I've loved him even when he was pulling away from me, even when I knew something was wrong. I love him. That's the problem. Steve nodded slowly. That's not a problem, Linda. That's the foundation you can build on if you both choose to. He stood up and turned to Robert, who was still standing where Linda had left him, looking utterly lost. Robert, come here. Robert approached hesitantly. Steve positioned them facing each other, with himself standing slightly to the side. Here's what I know about marriage after being married for many years myself, Steve began. Marriage is not a fairy tale. It's not constant passion and romance. It's work. It's choosing to love someone even when you don't feel particularly loving. It's remembering why you fell in love in the first place when life gets hard and boring and routine. He looked directly at Robert. You say you don't love your wife anymore, but I'm going to suggest something to you. I think you've confused falling out of love with falling into complacency. I think you've stopped working on your marriage and then blamed your wife for the emptiness you feel. Robert started to shake his head, but Steve held up his hand. Think about it. When was the last time you took Linda on a real date? When was the last time you had a deep conversation with her about something other than bills and schedules? When was the last time you looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman you married instead of just the person who shares your house? Robert's face crumpled as he considered these questions. I don't remember. It's been years. Steve turned to Linda. And you? When was the last time you told your husband what you need from him? When was the last time you said, this isn't working, we need to reconnect, instead of just accepting the distance between you? Linda wiped her eyes. I didn't want to rock the boat. I thought if I just kept being a good wife, if I just kept things running smoothly, eventually we'd find our way back to each other. Steve nodded. That's what a lot of couples do. They stop communicating. They stop being vulnerable with each other. They let the romance die and tell themselves that's just what happens in long-term relationships. But it doesn't have to be that way. He addressed them both now. I'm not saying what Robert did here today was right. It wasn't. It was hurtful and thoughtless. But maybe, just maybe, this horrible moment can be the wake-up call you both needed. He looked at Robert. You have a choice to make right now. You can walk away from this marriage, from this woman who still loves you despite what you just put her through. Or you can recognize that you've been sleepwalking through your life, and you can choose to wake up and fight for what you built together. He turned to Linda. And you have a choice too. You can decide that what he said is unforgivable, that the humiliation and hurt are too much to overcome. Or you can decide that your love for him is worth fighting for, that your marriage deserves a real chance to be saved. The studio was silent except for the sound of Linda's quiet crying. Steve continued, his voice gentle but insistent. Robert, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to really search your soul before you answer. Is it really that you don't love Linda? Or is it that you've been so disconnected from yourself and your marriage that you don't remember what love feels like anymore? Robert stood there, tears running down his face, and for a long moment he did not speak. When he finally did, his voice was barely audible. I don't know. I honestly don't know anymore. Steve nodded. That's actually a more honest answer than what you said before. Not knowing is different from being certain you don't love her. Not knowing means there's still something there to explore, still a chance to rediscover what you've lost. He gestured to Linda. Look at your wife. Really look at her. Robert turned to Linda, and for the first time in the entire exchange, he really saw her. Not as the person who represented his routine life, but as the woman who had stood beside him for over 2 decades, who had loved him through everything, who was sitting there crying because she still wanted their marriage to work despite the pain he had just caused her. Robert, tell me something, Steve said. Tell me one thing you love about Linda, not loved past tense, present tense. One thing. Robert struggled for a moment, then spoke. She has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. Cares about people, truly cares. She makes everyone around her feel seen and valued. Steve pressed him. Another thing, Robert's voice grew stronger. She's the best mother our son could have asked for. She's patient and wise, and she taught him to be kind. Steve kept pushing. Another. Robert was looking directly at Linda now. She has this laugh, this real genuine laugh when something truly delights her, and I haven't heard it in so long. I miss that laugh. His voice broke on the last words. Steve turned to Linda. Did you hear that? He misses your laugh. That's not someone who doesn't love you. That's someone who's forgotten how to show it. Linda was listening, her tear-stained face showing a mixture of hope and wariness. Steve addressed them both again. Here's what I think needs to happen. I think you both need to get off this stage, get away from these cameras, and have a real honest conversation. Not about who's to blame or who hurt who worse. A conversation about whether you're both willing to do the hard work of rebuilding your marriage. He looked at Robert. And you need to understand something. If Linda is willing to give you another chance after this, you better treat that gift with the respect it deserves. You better be willing to go to marriage counseling, to be vulnerable, to do the work of falling in love with your wife all over again. Because right now, she has every right to walk away from you, and if you don't step up, that's exactly what she should do. He turned to Linda. And you need to decide what you're willing to accept. You need to think about whether you can forgive this public humiliation, whether you believe he's capable of change, whether you want to fight for this marriage or whether it's time to let it go. Whatever you decide, you deserve to be with someone who chooses you every single day, who makes you feel valued and loved and cherished. Steve signaled to his production team and they began to clear the stage. He spoke to the Chen family, who had been standing awkwardly through this entire exchange. Folks, I apologize, but we're going to need to reschedule your appearance. We'll cover all your expenses to come back. This family needs privacy right now. The Chen family nodded understandingly and quietly left the stage. Steve then addressed the studio audience. Ladies and gentlemen, what you witnessed here today was real pain, real struggle, real marriage in crisis. I'm asking all of you, out of respect for this couple and their family, please do not share this on social media. Please do not gossip about what you saw. These are real people going through the hardest moment of their lives. Let's give them dignity and privacy. The audience murmured their agreement, and many people were crying themselves, moved by the raw emotion they had witnessed. Steve turned back to Robert and Linda. I'm going to have my team set you up in separate rooms where you can collect yourselves. Take whatever time you need. When you're ready, you can decide if you want to talk to each other or if you need more space. There's no right answer, no timeline you have to follow. Just take care of yourselves. Linda's son Michael had been standing with his aunt and uncle, watching his parents' marriage unravel in real time. He approached his mother and helped her stand. Mom, I'm here. Whatever you need, I'm here. Linda clung to her son, drawing strength from his presence. She looked at Robert one more time before leaving the stage. I don't know if I can forgive this. I don't know if we can come back from this, but I'm willing to try if you are. Really try, not just go through the motions. Robert nodded, his face etched with regret and something that might have been hope. I want to try. I want to be better. I want to be the husband you deserve. Linda did not respond, just let Michael guide her off stage. Robert's sister Karen approached him with a stern expression. That was one of the most selfish things I've ever witnessed. If Linda gives you another chance, you better not waste it. Robert could only nod, too overwhelmed to speak. Steve Harvey stood alone on the stage for a moment after everyone had left. He looked at the cameras that had been turned off and spoke quietly to his production team. That episode never airs. Destroy the footage. That family doesn't need their worst moment broadcast to millions of people. The producers agreed immediately, recognizing that some things were more important than ratings or dramatic content. In the days and weeks that followed, the Patterson family began the slow, painful process of healing. Robert and Linda did go to marriage counseling, starting with individual therapy for each of them before progressing to couples sessions. Linda worked through her hurt and humiliation with a therapist who helped her understand that Robert's declaration was not really about her inadequacy, but about his own disconnection from himself and his life. Robert explored in therapy why he had felt so trapped, why he had withdrawn from his marriage instead of communicating his unhappiness. He came to understand that he had been depressed, that he had been going through a midlife crisis of sorts, and that he had unfairly blamed Linda and their marriage for feelings that were really about his own fear of aging and mortality and unfulfilled dreams. The marriage counseling was not easy. There were sessions where they yelled at each other, where Linda expressed her anger and Robert had to sit with the pain he had caused. There were sessions where they both cried, grieving for the years they had lost to disconnection and routine. But there were also sessions where they began to remember why they had fallen in love in the first place, where they laughed together for the first time in years, where they started to envision a future that looked different from their past. 6 months after the family feud incident, Robert and Linda celebrated their 23rd anniversary with a quiet dinner at the restaurant where they had gone on their first date. Robert had asked Linda what she wanted to do, and she had chosen this, a return to their beginning. Over dinner, they talked about everything they had learned over the past months. Robert had cut back on his work hours and was making a conscious effort to be present in his marriage. Linda had started pursuing some of her own interests that had fallen by the wayside, taking a creative writing class and joining a book club. They had started dating each other again, going on weekly date nights where they talked about more than just logistics and responsibilities. They had rekindled their physical intimacy slowly and carefully, both of them nervous at first, but gradually rediscovering the comfort and connection they had once shared. They were not the same couple they had been at 21 and 23, but they were building something new that honored both who they had been and who they were becoming. About a year after the incident, Linda received a phone call from a producer at Family Feud. Steve Harvey had asked if the couple would be willing to meet with him privately. He wanted to know how they were doing, wanted to see if the intervention he had attempted on that difficult day had made any difference. Linda discussed it with Robert, and they decided to accept the invitation. They met Steve at a private office in Los Angeles. The moment he saw them walk in together, holding hands, his face broke into a genuine smile. "Look at you two, you look good together." They sat down, and Steve immediately addressed what everyone was thinking about. "I've thought about that day many times over this past year. I've wondered if I did the right thing, if I should have handled it differently." Linda shook her head. "Mr. Harvey, what you did that day may have saved our marriage. You stopped Robert from running away from his feelings. You made us both confront what was really happening. It was painful, but it was necessary." Robert nodded in agreement. "I was a coward that day. I had been a coward for years, actually. But you didn't let me just drop that bomb and walk away. You made me think about what I was really saying, what I was really throwing away." Steve leaned back in his chair, visibly relieved. "I'm glad to hear that, but I want to know the truth. How are you really doing? Are you together because you've done the work or because you're afraid of being alone?" Linda and Robert looked at each other, and there was something in that glance that spoke of genuine connection. Linda answered, "We're together because we choose to be. Every day we make that choice. Some days it's easy and some days it's hard, but we're both committed to making it work." Robert added, "I fell into the trap of thinking that love was a feeling that should just exist without any effort. I thought if I had to work at it, that meant it wasn't real. But I've learned that love is a choice, an action, a commitment. The feelings come and go, but the choice to love Linda, to honor her, to build a life with her, that's what real love is." Steve smiled, a warm, genuine expression of satisfaction. "That's wisdom right there. That's what I wish every couple understood before they got married. The romantic feelings that bring you together, those are just the beginning. The real marriage is what you build day after day, year after year, when you choose each other over and over again." They talked for over an hour about marriage, about forgiveness, about growth and change. Steve shared some of his own experiences, the mistakes he had made in past relationships, the lessons he had learned about what it really takes to make a marriage work. When they finally parted, Steve hugged them both. "I'm proud of you too. You did something really hard. You chose to fight for your marriage instead of giving up. That takes real courage." 2 years after the Family Feud incident, the Patterson family had transformed in ways they never could have imagined. The crisis that could have destroyed them had instead become the catalyst for profound positive change. Robert and Linda had renewed their wedding vows in a small ceremony with just close family and friends, writing new promises to each other that reflected the mature understanding of love they had developed. They had also become advocates for marriage counseling, speaking at their church about their experience, and encouraging other couples to seek help before problems became insurmountable. Linda had written about their journey in a blog that attracted a significant following of people dealing with similar struggles in their own marriages. Robert had started volunteering as a mentor for younger men, talking honestly about the mistakes he had made and how easy it is to take your spouse for granted. Their son Michael had watched his parents' journey with a mixture of pain and admiration. The initial devastation had given way to respect for how they had handled the aftermath, how they had been willing to be vulnerable and do the hard work of healing. He told them that watching them fight for their marriage had taught him more about love and commitment than any other experience in his life. Harvey occasionally checked in with the couple, sending texts on their anniversary or calling to see how they were doing. He had been profoundly affected by their story, using it as a reminder in his own life to never take his relationships for granted, to always make time for the people who matter most. He spoke about marriage and commitment in subsequent episodes of Family Feud without ever mentioning the Pattersons by name, but those who had been in the studio that day recognized the source of his wisdom. The incident itself remained private. True to Steve's word, the footage was destroyed, and while rumors circulated about something dramatic happening during a taping, the specific details never became public. The studio audience members honored Steve's request for discretion, recognizing that some moments are too sacred, too personal to be turned into entertainment or gossip. As this story draws to a close, it offers profound lessons about marriage, honesty, and the possibility of redemption. Linda Patterson taught us that love can survive even devastating betrayal if both people are willing to do the work of healing. She showed us that forgiveness is not weakness, but rather a courageous choice to believe in the possibility of change. Robert Patterson taught us that honesty without compassion is cruelty, that the timing and setting of difficult truths matter as much as the truths themselves. He demonstrated that real growth requires facing your own failures and taking responsibility for the pain you have caused. Harvey taught us that sometimes the most important intervention is simply refusing to let people run away from hard conversations. He showed us that authentic care means telling difficult truths with compassion, pushing people to look honestly at their choices while also offering hope that change is possible. Most importantly, their collective story reminds us that marriage is not about perfection, but about commitment, not about constant happiness, but about choosing love even when it is difficult. The story also illuminates important truths about the nature of long-term relationships. The passion and excitement that characterize the beginning of a relationship will inevitably evolve into something different over time. The question is whether couples will nurture that evolution into deeper intimacy and connection, or allow it to devolve into disconnection and resentment. Robert and Linda's journey shows that even when a marriage has deteriorated significantly, it can be rebuilt if both people are willing to be vulnerable, to communicate honestly, and to do the daily work of choosing each other. If you found this story meaningful and believe in the power of commitment, forgiveness, and the courage to fight for your marriage, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with someone who might need the reminder that even the most broken relationships can be healed if both people are willing to do the work. Together, we can create a culture that values commitment and perseverance over giving up when things get difficult. Today, Robert and Linda occasionally look back at that awful day on the Family Feud stage. It remains a painful memory, but it is also the turning point in their marriage, the moment when they had to decide whether to give up or fight. They chose to fight, and that choice has made all the difference. They have learned that love is not just a feeling but an action, a decision made new every single day. They have discovered that the deepest intimacy comes not from avoiding conflict, but from working through it together with honesty and grace. Their story serves as a powerful reminder that our worst moments do not have to define us. Instead, they can become the catalyst for transformation if we are brave enough to face them honestly and do the hard work of growth and change. The Family Feud stage witnessed the near destruction of a marriage, but it also witnessed the beginning of its redemption, proving that sometimes the most dramatic moments in our lives become the foundation for our greatest growth.